Are you based in New York, Ritik, at this point, or are you based in the Bay Area?
Yeah, New York for almost 6 years now. Grew up in the Bay Area before.
I'm actually just curious if like you get some weird AI culture shock where you get 100 miles outside of a certain metro area and like you start talking about AI things and people look at you blank, like I don't have no idea what you're talking about.
In Cave Creek, Arizona, we talk about it
I
constantly
imagine, yes.
where I am.
That's what I was
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. We're tying up our horses and we're talking about AI. It's exactly what's going on here.
It's really interesting because I would have agreed before, just, hey, well, in New York has a lot of AI conversation, and you step outside to even anywhere else on the East Coast, it's nowhere near as much. But actually, I realized I should be cognizant of where my baseline is being set, because I think it is like an order of magnitude different in San Francisco versus even New York. Because whenever I'm out in SF and talking to any friends out there, I mean, the level of conversation and sophistication of just, well, Nano Banana is able to do this, but actually ChatGPT combined, for to do this prompt, but then you put it into this is actually able to do that. And you can string, just like conversations go a lot deeper versus New York is still, I think, a little bit behind from that perspective versus San Francisco, which
Huh.
is unfortunate in my mind that there isn't that level of like creativity and curiosity that I think San Francisco has about every single way they can milk something out of the latest AI model and functionality as it is versus New York.
You know what? That doesn't shock me now that I think about it. Like, I mean, I've been working in the wealth management space for over 25 years. I grew up in New York. I started out in New York and then I moved to Arizona, which is not a hotbed of financial activity, although it has been growing. Um, but with all my time consulting, I traveled the country a lot and I spend a lot of time on the coast. And yeah, there is a difference for sure, I think, in like technology adoption and use. Sure, there's some like larger, bigger firms that might be more tech forward, have bigger budgets, things like that, right? That are obviously in New York or the tri-state area. But generally speaking, I think when I think of some of the advisors, yeah, it's like it's more it's more like NorCal, where people are more interested in tech. I go to Chicago and people aren't asking me about that sort of thing, even though it's a major city.
I think everyone in New York, when we bring this kind of topic up, usually says, but we have better restaurants, which, to be honest, they're probably right about that. There's like a litmus test. Do you know what this is?
Yes, yeah. The limitless pendant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I find it's like a litmus test when I travel. A lot of people know exactly what it is. Some people have no idea what it is, right? And just got acquired by Meta very recently. There we go. Look at
Yeah.
you.
This one's actually a different one. It's actually the Omi, I think, is what they called. So I actually tried all of them and settled around this one here. It's actually the Plod is the one that I use regularly. So it
You've got
looks
one of
like a
those, right,
Fitbit.
James?
I do. I just have the one that I keep on the back of my phone.
Yeah, there you go. That's the other version. So for whatever reason, I mean, like some form factors are good, some software is good, and I found that this is the best balance of the two. But the one I'm most looking forward to is the one that looks like an Oura ring and supposed to ship next year, or just sits on your finger and you can just talk to it or have it record. So I thought that was
Who
an interesting.
produces that?
I think it's another startup. Name is escaping me. I have it
Okay.
on pre-order.
All right. You're deep in. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. We should probably this has been awesome, but we should probably actually get started. 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Welcome to AI for Advisors with Mark Heinen and James Cantwell. Every week, Mark and James break down the latest in the world of wealth tech and AI, and occasionally bring in guests to spice things up. This is not investment advice and not professionally produced. I am not real and not yet sentient. Now let's get on with the show.
Welcome to AI for Advisors with James Cantwell and myself, Mark Heinen. James, how you doing?
I'm doing great today, Mark. How are you? It's Flamingo Friday here. I'm
It's
in my
awesome.
like future-proof gear.
You got an awesome shirt on. Your shirt game is top notch. So we are super excited to have Ritik Malhotra on the show with us today. Hi, Ritik. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Very excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So, for those who are not aware, Ritik is a serial tech entrepreneur with 2 exits before the age of 30. First to Box in 2014, then a corporate wealth management product sold to Brex in 2019. And then as director of product management at Brex, he built Brex Cash from zero to a core business line. By the way, I'm in San Francisco, and Brex now has ads in San Francisco marketing that they are intelligent AF, which obviously stands for agentic finance. I'm not sure where your mind went with that. So he's a Y Combinator and Teal Fellowship alum with BS in electrical engineering and computer science from Berkeley. So after a second exit, Ritik, started working with a financial advisor, and I'll probably let him tell that story. But, I think very excited to have him on because Savvy Wealth has been really on a meteoric track. $4 billion of AUM as of December 2025. That's 400% growth since early 2024. 100 plus advisors on the platform, 100 million plus in total funding, and really leaning into AI with co-pilots and a number of meeting assistant tools, and really bridging the tech company vibe of building a next generation tech platform, and obviously actually building an RAA, firm from scratch, which is pretty phenomenal.
All at the same time. You're not busy at all.
Yeah, it's really pretty phenomenal. And I think what's interesting about this, I was reflecting on a little bit coming to the show. Really, first of all, Ritik, you don't come from a wealth management background, came into this industry and, are killing it. Second, a lot of people who, like we talked about maybe coming to the show, grew up in the Bay Area, live in New York, the bias might be to build a software company. You decided, hey, actually what I want to do is actually build an RAA and build from scratch, sort of the mode of, building the operational thing rather than just building the software and selling it to the operational thing, which I think is really fascinating. So really excited about this conversation. So yeah, Ritik, why don't we start by getting to know you a little better? I'd love to understand the origin story behind Savvy, where the idea came from. Was it a bumpy road? Was it a smooth road? What was the aha moment? How have things been going? Would love for you to tell your story a little bit.
There's those tiered questions again.
Yeah, I love loading on the questions.
Did you write all that down?
Yeah, I love loading on the questions.
I have all of this in my head, and I think I'm supposed to say this all in 30 seconds. No, well, appreciate the tee up, Mark. So let's see. I think the story really starts from the first exit. So when we were building the first company, I dropped out of college, raised money from Y Combinator. We hired our friends, which were basically anyone that we knew in college, and we built this cloud storage software company that we eventually sold to Box in 2014, and Box went public the year after. So fun fact, if you've ever used Box's software on your computer, on a Windows or Mac, that's the same stuff that we built back in my dorm room. Hopefully it's working well. But that was the company that we built. And as part of that, I tell people I had the best problem in the world, which was I went from being completely broke as a college dropout to having life-changing amount of money as Box went public. I was very young, I think 21 at the time, and just had absolutely no idea what to do with this amazing problem. So my investors at the first company told me to go find a financial advisor. I said, great, I have no idea how to even approach this, but let me go and try to figure this out. And really, to condense the story to between that point, 2015 and starting Savvy in 2021, really the things that happened were, number one, I just fell in love with the industry, spoke with probably 100 plus advisors, just curiosity drove those conversations. Worked with, I think, 2 advisors as well over that time period. And the thing that I realized, which probably is obvious to all of us now, is that the advisor, super helpful, helped me navigate a number of things I had no idea about. But the actual way of working with the advisor was highly antiquated. I mean, snail mailing my documents. I remember this rainy day in San Francisco, running to the post office to mail something. And I was trying to think about how I got to this position. Why couldn't I just use some digital form? No dashboards.
Especially the guy who built a cloud document storage system.
Well,
yeah, exactly. Why aren't they using Box? Exactly.
It's funny. That was one of my criteria when I was looking for an advisor. I said, they should be using Box. And then I found that I'd have no advisor at all because no one was using anything Box related, at least back in, in that time. Anyways, the story just kind of kept spiraling and there's no digital interaction. One time I got a dashboard from my advisor, but it was all wrong and it showed my net worth was half of what it was. So that caused even more panic. This puzzling issue just kept me awake. And what I found is that advisors would say either they're at these 100-plus-year-old banks that don't think about technology or AI or anything like that. So they're hamstrung, so they can't really help their clients with any better technology experience. Or they built their own independent firm and actually spend even less time with clients. Now you have about 7 to 12 different disparate systems that don't integrate with one another. And now they spend more time in data entry. So just kept going on and on. Finally, to even get to the punchline of Savvy, ultimately our second business actually pivoted and became a corporate wealth business that we scaled to about 10 billion in AUM at Brex. And that was to help corporate accounts manage their money and do their banking activities and so on, and also run effectively a treasury program for them to earn yield. And that helped understand how we could use technology to build that and so on. Combine that with all the stuff that I'd learned about wealth advisors and their pain points. I became a small time advisor myself to help our friends and family to learn what the pain points were myself. Gave lectures on personal finance to new college grads just because I just loved everything about it by this point. Finally said, there's nothing out there that's really solving this core problem of enabling the advisor to run with better technology for them, like let alone the clients. And that's the core problem to solve. And we said, let's go and build that solution ourselves. And that's how we got to here.
Ritik, yeah, I mean, you kind of gave us some of this, but I'll ask the question anyway. Like, is there something that you or others as a tech founder, you think you have an advantage or something you see that those like myself who grew up in this industry are likely missing and saw the opportunity?
I think the answer is both yes and no, because I think actually there is a benefit to being somewhat of an outsider coming into it, because it allows you to take a little bit more of that call it that a first principles approach to answering some of these questions versus assuming you have the answer in your mind because of an experience you had in the past. And I say that somewhat neutrally because that allows you to design on a whiteboard, like, hey, the experience might be better if it was built like this. And then you can go and ask others, hey, why hasn't something like this been done? And oftentimes when you're able to ask people who have been in the industry for a while and learn what their answer is, and they're sometimes looking puzzled of, I don't know why someone hasn't thought of it this way. That's the likely moment that you actually have something that could potentially work. And so I think that naivete is actually a superpower in the early days. At the same time, being naive and only hiring and working with the people like that is also a recipe of disaster. So actually, early on, we identified we need to have a balance of people who come from the industry but are open-minded and creative, but also who come from outside the industry but may have learned at an adjacent industry, like maybe they worked in healthcare and helped healthcare providers in some way. And so you can learn how they worked with them to apply technology and maybe apply some of those learnings as well. So it's a balance.
I like that, but also from a personal standpoint, because I've been building something over the past year, and that's kind of the mindset that I have. I've been in this industry. Maybe I should get some people on the team with a different perspective who may question things like that. I'll teach them the industry and let them bring in that outside perspective. So cool. I like it. Maybe I'm on the right track.
Yeah. Are there
I think so.
examples? I'm curious, like examples of things you notice something and you realize from a first principles point of view, this does not make sense. And this is the thing to solve. And conversely, is there something you really wanted to implement and then the structure or the constructs of the industry just made it not viable or possible?
Yeah, let's see. The first one I think was actually the first product. So oftentimes when we would, before even starting the company, actually just spend time talking to advisors, understanding what their main pain points were and really drilling in deeper. One of the things that advisors would just kind of would say is an acute pain point was onboarding for new clients. And there was a myriad of things that they would say. But then when I asked about, what the process was or at their current firm or how they, just to dig in deeper, they would almost brush it off of, this is just how it is. Like, hey, look, they would start defending the process almost. Look,
Yeah.
it takes X number of days and that's okay. It's at least better than that firm and that firm. And they're comparing it to other more kind of still pen and paper legacy institutions. So that got me thinking of, okay, if they think it's a big pain point, but they're defending the way that it is, there's almost this like level of justification happening because maybe no one has the industry has seen what good looks like. So then we went about it and said, okay, well, could we deconstruct this highly complicated decision tree of forms effectively is what onboarding is and the questions you need to ask to be compliant and open these accounts and et cetera, and make a much more programmatic digital flow that is easier for the client to fill in. Doesn't require double data entry. If you're opening 6 accounts, you don't need to enter it 6 times and all that stuff. And the advisor can get things done at a faster pace, right? Like simple concepts to understand. And when we presented the first few versions of it, advisors were blown away. They're like, how is this possible? Like, how did this doesn't make any sense. And it's almost this warped reality that they're viewing. I would call that table stakes today, but 4 or 5 years ago when we were showing this, I think it was quite magical. So that's an example of the
I
first
think
one.
it's still magical today. I mean, when I talk to firms and even a lot of the technology firms, they're absolutely really focused on account opening and client onboarding. It's still a major pain point. The barrier that I see now, I know you guys work closely with Schwab and Fidelity specifically, but the barrier that I see is really on the custodian side, right? There's also some complexity in like different forms being required and everything, but it's that lack of standardization where each custodian's got a different set of forms, a different way they want them submitted. Some of them are fillable PDFs, some are not. I think everybody's pretty much away from wet signature, but there's probably some scenarios where we're not. And so I see that as kind of the challenge. It's really like the artificial rules. And it's trying to figure out how to get past those and work with those institutions to say, hey, here's the benefit of letting us work with you. And I imagine you probably did some of that.
That's spot on. Basically, understanding what the rules are and saying when, and actually, we actually did some negotiation with the custodians of allowing, hey, we need the ability to use our version of DocuSign at the very least. You can verify that everything is up to snuff and the security measures are what you want, and they did. They did that audit, but we needed that so that we can at least control some of the automation. Otherwise, we can't do form pre-filling in the way that we wanted to, as an example. So some of it was that. Others was, look, if we have to do it the way that they want us to do it, we'll have to write our own software to really reverse engineer it such that we can fill in the forms exactly the way that they want, which is still automated to the end client. So we will deal with that problem. But to the custodian, we will comply with exactly how they want it. And so those are some of the things, the messy middle that we have to solve.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the custodians to finally catch up because I think this is something that's really
You're
common.
going to be waiting a long time, I think.
Yeah, I know, but like the incentive isn't there. And that's, I mean, we could, we could talk about that over beer sometimes, but the reality is like, I see a lot of this in the industry and Ritik, you're not looking at it with this lens, but a lot of the other technology providers are like, how do we band-aid something? How do we make this a partial solution that hides the pain, but never actually gets to root cause? And that's good enough, right? It's good enough to build a good business on. It's good enough to have really good ARR. It's good enough to sell a business with. It makes customers relatively happy. It's better than where they were. So there's a lot of reasons like why that makes sense, but it's interesting when you just see it stop, right? Like we could make this way better. We could look to make it consistent across all the banks. We could do that. And it's like, nah, we'll stop here. So I'm glad to see that you're going broader than most in trying to solve the issues here.
I think, right? Ritik was highly incentivized. I imagine any startup founder is highly incentivized. Altruist is highly incentivized to build a better process. I don't think the existing incumbents are that incentivized. I think people decide they want to use Schwab, they're going to use Schwab no matter how many forms they want to fill out, right? I think that's like ultimately what it comes down to. But yeah, I'm actually curious about the converse as well. Like something you're like, we got to be able to solve this. And you hit a wall because the industry is what the industry is, or people are the way people are. I've heard people say, the actual tech savviness or willingness to use tech of the customer base, because the customer base is obviously aging by definition in wealth management, is like a big blocking point, just as an example. But yeah, I'm just curious if you have an example.
There's probably many micro examples that were coming to my mind where, again, just goes back to the naivete. And I'm glad we didn't just only think naively. It's, we said, well, great. If we build something and help advisors move over, they should be able to move over all their clients. But of course, there's restrictive covenants and so many different complexities in moving a client over if the custodian that they were at previously is using some proprietary products and whatnot and doesn't move over. And that basically there was a number of things of saying, we just want to make this transition as seamless as possible. We can build all of these automations like we were talking about and account openings and so on and so forth. But actually, there's just a legal and people problem first and foremost. It's like you can't move them over if the client is on vacation. It's like, okay, well, we have to make sure that we need to account for that. If there's a legal problem, it's like if their firm is going to be litigious, and that's another thing to work through. So I'd say those are some of the ones that don't have a software solution, but you just need to be aware of. So those are some. I would say another one, which maybe a middle of the road, which is something that's taken a long time, but I think is actually now possible, is Going back to how deeply you can integrate with custodians. So if you just think about the broad landscape, today there's almost these like two worlds where either you work with the Fidelities and Schwabs of the world where you can just abide by whatever their process is, or effectively Altruist has decided they just are going to recreate the entire custodian because there's no other way, right? We actually found after many, many years, that there's a middle of the road option where we're now actually in talks with Fidelity to deeply integrate with their clearing and custody systems such that we can actually overcome some of the, hey, this is the way that has to be done type of policies, but yet still leverage the Fidelity infrastructure, right? So it's almost this balance of we don't need to recreate the custodian to be able to avoid some of these pen and paper processes, but being able to do that actually took a lot of multiple years of just, negotiating and talking to them, finding the right people. But you asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, yeah, you're right. I mean, we have to live in the world that we have to do everything the way that is defined by the custodians. That's what I thought it was. Or we have to build our own custodian like Altruist. But I'm glad there's a middle ground here.
So I think let's talk about that. Let's talk about how most of the firms are on one side of the fence or the other, right? You're either an Orion, an Adipar, right? Building technology solutions, working with different wealth management firms. In some cases, you might be, a Focus or a Hightower, Dynasty, one of those larger aggregators who are certainly focusing and building proprietary tech, but you're really doing both, right? You've built an RIA, you've built a technology platform for the business. And I just want to kind of hear more about why not pick a lane? Why do both? Why take this on? And maybe we could also get into, see, now I'm going to love the question. Now maybe we can also get into your Iron Man suit description. I'd love to tell the audience a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That decision was even before starting the company. The question was effectively, should we pick a lane, RIA only, software only, or you kind of do the hybrid approach? And so in situations like this, I think the thing that my mind goes to is like, let's go and first try to figure out if the answer can easily be solved by talking to our core user, the advisor of the platform. So what we actually had found, there was a number of things that led to this decision. The first was that a lot of these aggregators were focused on, no pun intended, of these larger institutions that they could acquire and gobble up. So $1 billion+ firms and so on and so forth. And so there was all of this very long tail of the market, which is these advisors that were either working at a captive institution, effectively operating either as a solo advisor or a small team, or had broken out and wanted to start their own independent business. And I said, there's no one really paying attention to the truly independent solo or small team operator. And that's like an area that just doesn't want to sell their business. They want to run it, right? So that's one. The second is when we talked to them, they said, look, I don't move and, from these captive institutions to start my own business because this sounds like a really big hassle and the costs and so on and so forth. Now I have to set up an RIA, deal with all these compliance and whatnot. So we looked at this and these conversations, you just keep going down this track. And we actually realized the best way to solve the customer pain point here of the fear of moving and dealing with the hassles of complexity of business and whatnot is actually by building a fully vertically integrated solution of saying, look, we will handle the RA infrastructure for you. That's the internal infrastructure. And by the way, our core thesis is that you can actually run your business far more effectively without having to add a bunch of people, et cetera, and needing 10 million plus in revenue to actually afford to do what you want to do, because we'll build all that infrastructure in-house with our own technology as well. So to answer your question, we arrived at this by just applying the principle of like, okay, what is actually who is the ideal customer and what is going to solve their pain point? And I think this is still the best way to go about it.
I like that this is going down market a little bit for who you want to help because, I mean, the money is often at the higher end of the market. You can do these lower volume deals, enterprise deals that make a ton of money kind of in a single shot, and building a platform that helps the smaller advisor continue to grow, support them, let them focus on their core business. And we'll probably get to this in a few minutes with our best of LinkedIn section, but like the advisor's got a lot to do and they got a lot on their plate. So the more they can lean on a platform to help them do the things that isn't core to them bringing value to the customer, the better.
Yeah. I mean, the counter is always best of breed, right? So what would you say to like the PE firm who says like, we've picked this tech stack. We're always going to have the best of breed. We're going to recommend it to the independent RIA. We're going to make sure it all works together, but you're not trying to do everything. We're going to have the best of breed from all these different companies, and they can then hook it up themselves in the background.
It's interesting because when we started the company, we said, well, we should either validate that's the right way to do this and maybe build around that concept, or actually just, the way that we've now ended up. And effectively, what we tried is we tried to figure out the best of breed approaches. And look, I think it actually gets you about 70% of the way there. And actually, when we asked advisors about the best of breed approach, even the best ones that had built it, they said, I asked them experience, give me the letter grade. And they all somehow said something around a C plus. And I think that's our conclusion as well. Now, why? We can, spend probably hours about all the things we found, but generally speaking, you're limited in terms of how the experience and workflows can be built in, even as customized a Salesforce or a wealth box that you have. And then how deeply does it integrate with the other kind of platforms? Maybe it does. Some of them do, but some of them actually don't. And maybe there's certain data fields that are actually just missing. There's no actual way to even API something into eMoney for a certain set of things. So those are the kinds of things we kept running into. Not saying it's not good, but just we thought you could look at controlling the full stack, you actually can get better. So that was really one approach. The other one that I'd say is actually counterintuitively to offer the level of customizability that independent advisors expect, because each independent advisor has maybe a small quirk that makes them different in the way that they operate, let's say their calendar of services, for example, with their clients than one other one. So actually you would think best of breed is enabling that customizability because you can, customize the technology stack. However, counterintuitively, the issue is that the integration of all these different best of breeds is actually already complicated, but it strictly kind of puts everything into, you have to work in a specific workflow to make all this work. So we actually said, if you build it from scratch, we can actually integrate customizability functionality into the layer and ensure that everything is working all in one. So for example, we have a service calendar, product. I'm sure there's many other ones out there, but the level of customizability allows each advisor to set it up the way they want to. And the way that they set up that will actually flow into the way that our task system works and reminders works for clients and forms and so on and so forth. And that level of customizability we thought was a core value prop.
That's interesting. And have you been approached by people just on the flip side of that who say, I'd love to use the Savvy Wealth platform, but, we don't want to join your RIA or maybe even other scale RIAs who want to use your platform? How do you think of those conversations?
But we have a number of those. A lot of people reaching out every week about that. I think the two things is, first is focus is one of the most important things in a business like ours. And so we say, look, we have one way that we want to go to business. Otherwise, it might cannibalize our attention and therefore ruin the experience for both. So even if there's a good business opportunity to do it, I think, again, focus is the best way to build a long-term durable business. And I think second is that the way that we have built the products is uniquely suited for the internal RIA infrastructure. And so if you sell this as a software platform to someone else, some of the same assumptions that are baked into how the internal RIA works may not be true. And that's okay. Other companies can run the way they want to. And I think that's an area that we could surely build towards and make it a modularized software only platform. But again, it just goes back to that focus question. Is that really how we want to spend our resources?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Well, we're about 20 minutes into an AI podcast. We haven't talked about AI yet, so we might want to pivot into that a little bit. So I think maybe the high level question is, how are you using AI? How transformational has it been? And, where has it fallen short?
So our view since the beginning was we build the workflows like, a SaaS company might build them, and then find ways to integrate AI into the specific points in the workflow that could enable and speed things up, which is slightly different than a fully AI native approach, right? You get this box and you say, do this, and suddenly magic happens and it gets outputted. The reason that we went about this, and we'll go into specifics in a second to answer your question, the reason we did this is that it was difficult for an advisor to jump directly from, hey, here's my old school firm's way to do something, all the way to there's this magic box. And so there's almost this, you have to help the advisor kind of understand, well, here's the workflow that you're actually doing when you're doing all these things manually. And that's presented in this digital manner. And then you can actually just speed up the workflow, which is effectively how perhaps another assistant maybe on their team might have helped them because they would have done that work for them. So, sorry, that's the philosophy of how we've integrated AI. Now, the points in the product that we're able to integrate it in, well, first, a few table stakes ones, right? You got the meeting note takers, kind of table stakes these days. But we said, okay, well, integrating that into the workflow. So the meeting gets scheduled. We slurp everything up into our CRM so we know which meeting is being recorded. And then we can take those notes, We have all the context about the client already because, well, we are the CRM and the note taker and all the other stuff in one. So we're able to use that, extract out specific action items related to their accounts and securities and cash and put them in, and then send a summary that's relevant to the client. And I think the world is starting to get to this point, right? Note takers plus CRMs in one is I think where the industry is headed. And I think that was much easier for us to achieve given we were the system of record. So that's one area. Another area where AI is uniquely helpful is in investment proposal generation. Again, kind of you think about the gammas of the world generating slides for generic use cases. What we realized is advisors are also generating slides for showing proposals of how they expect the investment portfolios to transform if a prospective client moves over to them, right? They say, hey, thanks for sending your statements. We'll show you how we can better invest your money to achieve your goals. And there's this presentation they pulled together. We said, well, hold on. This is mostly just a data problem of OCR, their prior statements, figure out the best analysis on how they should transform them and to achieve the client's goals. And we're able to interject AI into generating that content into the slide format that advisors need. And that cut down the average time from 60 to 90 minutes to about 90 seconds. So that's a clear workflow example of just, shortening the amount of time. Anyways, I can go on and on, but those are some of the ways.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think the thing you said at the top is interesting. Like from a product philosophy point of view, it sounds like you didn't want to overwhelm your users. You didn't want to change too much too soon. So you were looking for strategic points at which you can introduce things that were sort of delightful. Were there points at which you introduced AI and your users rejected it or didn't get adoption or actually were hostile towards it? Have you seen examples of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's come if the AI functionality is generating what we would probably call slop or 90th percentile there, but it's like, this is going to take longer to edit than for me to do. Easy example was we had a very rudimentary version of generating a financial, not even a financial plan, but recommendations based on what a client had said. It just wasn't up to snuff. I mean, we didn't have enough built out information ingested in order for really that to be useful. Because ultimately, what we realized is that advisors wanted to build a robust financial plan in order to drive some of the recommendations that they had. And so, unless you had a full plan detail baked in with all the assumptions that go into it, it was difficult to do that. Another one was we had a first version of generating emails on behalf of the advisor before they can send it back to their clients. Again, a quality issue. I think we just hadn't trained and fine-tuned the prompts that we were using to make that worth it. And so we had to spend a lot of time to really get that into a much better place.
Are you currently drafting emails? Does your system draft emails for your clients?
For some specific use cases, yes, the advisor can generate an email that they can then copy and edit, but it is not doing that automatically for all emails just yet that advisors want to send.
I think that building philosophy you have is pretty interesting. And at first it was counterintuitive. And as I'm listening and thinking, I'm realizing it's actually far more intuitive than I initially thought, because you're also bringing the advisor. I mean, you kind of described it already, but you're bringing the advisor along with you. It's making adoption a little bit easier when it doesn't have that drastic change, right? And I'm just kind of rephrasing a little bit of what you said, I think, but like that makes a lot of sense because there's so much resistance when somebody doesn't understand what's happening, how they can make tweaks along the way, adjust it. They kind of want to check it as it's being built, not put something in and get a final product. They want to be part of it. And so speeding it up is a really good way to like let you do it. And as they get more used to the platform and AI gets better, it's just probably easy fixes to pull those middle points out and replace them with AI.
It's a well-articulated summary of this. Advisors are discerning about anything they want to send to their clients. And that's a core skill set because, it's a business of trust.
Yeah.
And to that point, they don't want just some magic box because that is not building trust. They're like, what the heck happened? Do I trust this enough to send this to my clients? So that's really where the philosophy came from. What's interesting is now in a world where there has been enough time since the GPT style text boxes have become normalized, we're now finally actually releasing not a full fledged, hey, here's a GPT like box, but actually a chat companion where it is going to be more free-form text, but that'll be to help the advisor ask questions about anything in their own CRM and data set, right? And there's a ton of data in there. So we're slowly evolving into that form, but that is not the default mechanism. And there's a balance.
So we're reaching the end of 2025. So good point for reflection. Do you think note takers were overhyped or underhyped in 2025 in terms of their like long-term impact?
I think it's almost like the question is begging the answer already. I think they may be overhyped, but that's more because of, I guess, the frothiness of how venture capital looked at them and so on and so forth. I think overhyped right now, but that's because there was so much deal activity. I think in the long term, they will do exactly, I think, what an advisor's expecting them to do, which is they don't need a separate person to take notes for them and also extract out the key points and action items. I think they're almost there. Even the note taker companies are realizing that there's only so much rope that can have. And so now they're evolving into, well, how do we become the system of record? Because if all you're doing is generating the notes and action items, you're somewhat limited by the data set you have. And the advisors are going to want that to be integrated into their workflow, aka the CRM, aka the system of record. So yeah, maybe a nuanced answer.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll take the opposite side of that and say they were massively underhyped. And that's because the impact of a note taker is going to be felt much for many years in the future, because the note taker allows you to digitize an element of your digital work life or of your work life that has not been digitized before. Having that, having your notes digitized, your meeting digitized, even your transcript digitized if people are saving it, having an AI be able to look at that and then actually take action on that is going to be instrumental. People 4 years from now are going to say, well, what did this person say back in December of 2025 when it came to, any topic? And they can actually look that up, whereas before they couldn't look that up. So I think the fact it's creating a brand new primitive that has never been around before is going to have long-term implications. I think also the fact it's more or less been normalized is interesting. I think that wasn't the case in the beginning of this year. And now I think 90% of the meetings I'm on have a note taker from someone else, not the knapsack note taker, which is the best in the business, by the way. Try it today, knapsack.ai. So, yeah, so I think that's my take on that. Actually, just so related to that, I had another like big picture question, and then I want to like dig into some recent news.
I think we're also short on time, Mark.
Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, what do you think is the biggest unsolved problem for AI in wealth management today?
Biggest unsolved problem of AI. I think I'm just thinking back to like what are all the problems we are always running into and spending the most amount of time. It comes down to truly the accuracy here. And the reason I think that is that's not a new problem. I mean, we know that AI is like getting it to be, reduce the hallucinations down to as low as possible is a constant battle. The reason I think that is actually the number one problem in this is in the industry is because of what we were just talking about. Advisors are extremely discerning about what they're sending to their client. So even if it's something's like 96%, 98% accurate, which I believe AI could probably get to today, it's still not good enough. And I think like that's the area that really kind of bugs me. And we just need way more attention to that last 2%.
Is there an expectation issue with some of that though? I mean, like if you're automating something, that's one thing, right? You likely need that 100%, depending on what it is, right? Especially if we're, let's say, trading. But if it's email generation or, summarization or some of these other things, I mean, isn't 98% as good as most humans, if not better anyway?
You're absolutely right. So actually, it's a good point because I'm conflating two things. One is that if an assistant who had written the email or done the notes, et cetera, had given something to an advisor, I mean, certainly 98% probably, best performance review ever. But I think it's because the advisor knows that their job is, as their manager to review that before doing anything with it. And so I think you're right. There's almost this framing question of, look, a computer is not just automatically going to get everything right. And so there's that reframing of expectations. I think the second one is that the default assumption that anyone in the industry has is that there's a little bit of skepticism with AI. And so therefore AI as the sentient being has a much higher bar they need to clear
Exactly.
in order for the advisor or whomever to build that trust. And I think, as a sentient being, maybe that's unfair, but that's where we are.
It's the same self-driving car problem, right? The
Yeah,
people have self-driving
Exactly.
cars. Yeah,
exactly.
same dynamic. So how are we doing on time, Ritik? Do you have a hard stop coming up now?
Unfortunately, I do, and I feel like we could go for hours.
Yeah, that's all good. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, and we should book again and keep the conversation going. But thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing what you build next.
Appreciate it.
Same here.
All right.
Thank you, Ritik.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take care, all.
Appreciate
care.
it.